My family turned my husband against me because I could not have a child, and when I came with a child he found out a big secret. From the earliest days of my childhood, I sensed an undercurrent of disappointment emanating from my parents. They never voiced it directly, they didn't need to. The subtle glances, the sighs, the way their eyes would drift past me, it was clear they had envisioned a son. When my sister, Marla, arrived 3 years later, I overheard my mother whisper to my father, "Perhaps the next one will be a boy." But there was no next one. Complications during Marla's birth ensured that. Their dreams of a son were shelved, deferred perhaps to the hope of grandsons in the distant future. Growing up in our modest home in Ohio, I watched Marla effortlessly become the center of their universe. With her curly auburn hair and infectious laugh, she had a way of making people, especially our parents, gravitate toward her. She'd flash those white hazel eyes, and they'd melt, acquiescing to her every whim. Meanwhile, I became self-reliant, understanding early on that seeking their attention was a futile endeavor. It's not that they neglected me, my basic needs were always met. But the warmth, the unsolicited hugs, the words of encouragement, those were reserved for Marla. I remember one evening during my senior year of high school. We were gathered around the dinner table when I mustered the courage to announce, "I've decided to study architecture." My parents exchanged a glance. "Architecture," my mother echoed, her fork pausing mid-air. "That's quite technical." My father nodded slowly. "Have you considered something more traditional for a young woman? Perhaps teaching or nursing?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I've already been accepted to the University of Cincinnati's program. They offered me a partial scholarship based on my portfolio." Marla, still in high school, smirked from across the table. "I'm thinking of studying psychology," she interjected. Our parents' faces lit up. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother gushed. "You've always been so intuitive." I pushed the peas around on my plate, their voices fading into the background. I'd long since stopped seeking their approval, focusing instead on carving out my own path. It was during my sophomore year at university that I met Nolan. He was a senior, deeply engrossed in the world of urban planning. Our paths crossed in the library's design section. I had been engrossed in a book on sustainable structures when he accidentally bumped into my table, sending my notes scattering. "Apologies," he said, gathering my papers. "You're in Professor Latham's class, right? I've seen you sketching those intricate designs." I nodded, slightly taken aback. "Yes, that's me." He offered a warm smile. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? We could discuss design philosophies." That coffee date evolved into dinners, late-night study sessions, and weekend hikes. For the first time, I felt truly seen. Nolan appreciated me for who I was, without comparisons or conditions. After his graduation, Nolan secured a position at a renowned design firm in the city. We decided to move in together, finding a quaint apartment downtown. It wasn't perfect, the pipes rattled, and the windows leaked during storms, but it was ours. We'd spend evenings sketching out dream projects, sharing our aspirations, and building a life together. When the time came for Nolan to meet my parents, I braced myself for their reactions. To my surprise, they were enamored. "Nolan," my mother beamed, "it's so lovely to finally meet you. Will you be joining us for Thanksgiving? Christmas?" My father clapped him on the back. "Tell me about your work in design. Sarah says you're quite the visionary." The term son was thrown around liberally. It dawned on me that, through Nolan, they were vicariously experiencing the son they never had. They peppered him with questions about his career, his future plans, and subtly, about when he might settle down. Marla, who had been living at home after her own graduation and was between jobs, observed from the sidelines, her expressions unreadable. For once, I had something she didn't, and the shift in dynamics was palpable. A year into our cohabitation, during a quiet dinner at home, Nolan had prepared his signature risotto, complete with garlic bread that set off our temperamental smoke detector. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady, "will you marry me?" Tears welled up as I nodded. "Yes, Nolan. 1,000 times, yes." We opted for a small, intimate wedding, much to my parents' chagrin. "It's your special day," my mother argued. "Don't you want something grand?" "This is special," I insisted. "It's exactly what we want." The ceremony was held in a serene garden, surrounded by close friends and a few family members. Nolan and I exchanged vows under a canopy of wisteria, sealing our commitment in the place where our journey had begun. But as the honeymoon glow faded, external pressures began to mount. During a Sunday dinner, my mother broached the topic we'd been dreading. "So," she began, her eyes gleaming with anticipation, "when can we expect some good news?" I exchanged a glance with Nolan. We're focusing on our careers right now, I replied carefully. We want to be financially stable before starting a family. My father shook his head. Your mother and I started with nothing, and we managed just fine. Every family gathering thereafter seemed to revolve around tales of acquaintances becoming grandparents, subtle nudges, and not-so-subtle hints. The weight of their expectations pressed heavily upon us, casting shadows over our otherwise harmonious life. 2 years into our marriage, after diligent saving and meticulous planning, Nolan and I purchased our first home. It was a charming craftsman-style house with a wraparound porch and a garden that begged for attention. We envisioned filling its rooms with laughter, love, and, eventually, children. However, we were resolute in our decision to wait until we felt entirely prepared. Just as we were settling into our new abode, Marla made an unexpected announcement during one of our family dinners. I'm expecting, she declared, her hand resting gently on her abdomen. It's Garrett's. Garrett was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a musician with a penchant for disappearing ex. Our parents, however, seemed unfazed by his dubious reliability. This is wonderful news, my mother exclaimed, already mentally redecorating the guest room into a nursery. Over the ensuing months, our parents transformed their home to accommodate Marla's impending arrival. They attended prenatal classes with her, redecorated rooms, and even discussed converting the study into a playroom. When little Eliza was born, she became the sun around which their world revolved. They doted on her, documenting every milestone, every giggle, every new tooth. During our visits, I observed Nolan with Eliza. He'd cradle her, making soft cooing sounds, his eyes reflecting a longing he hadn't voiced. My mother noticed too. Nolan is such a natural with children, she'd comment, her gaze lingering on me. He'll make a wonderful father. The insinuation was clear. The pressure. The insinuation was clear. The pressure was mounting. Nolan and I began trying. I started tracking my cycle, cutting out caffeine, taking prenatal vitamins, even practicing yoga to ease stress. Each month that passed without success deepened the silence between us. I told myself it was normal, that it could take time, that I just needed to be patient. But deep down, I was scared. While I buried myself in fertility forums and healthy meal planning, Nolan spent more and more time at my parents' house. He helped my father fix the fence, helped Marla build a crib, and babysat Eliza with a natural ease that turned my mother's soft suggestions into sharp reminders. You should see the way he plays with her, she told me once, not unkindly. It's just a shame. We're trying, Mom, I whispered. Are you sure? You've always been so career-focused. Her words were daggers cloaked in concern. Eventually, I made an appointment with a fertility specialist, partly to get answers and partly to quiet the chorus of voices, mine included, asking what was wrong with me. Nolan came with me, holding my hand during ultrasounds, tests, blood work. I appreciated his support, though it was clear neither of us truly believed anything serious would be found. Then came the day of the results. Sarah, the doctor said gently, based on the results, it appears you may be experiencing premature ovarian insufficiency. It means, it's unlikely you'll be able to conceive naturally. Her voice was calm, measured, but I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I barely heard anything after that. Nolan squeezed my hand. I could feel him next to me, but he may as well have been miles away. On the drive home, we sat in silence. That night, we didn't speak much either. We both just stared at our dinner until it got cold. There are options, he said eventually. IVF, adoption, this doesn't have to be the end of the road. I nodded, but I was numb. The next family dinner, I made the decision to tell them. I was tired of dodging their hopeful glances and leading questions. It was time to end the guessing. Mom, Dad, I said, after setting down my fork, I need to share something. We've been trying for over a year. And after tests, it turns out I'm unable to have children. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, my mother's expression shifted from concern to something harder. You're infertile, she repeated, as if the word were poison. What kind of woman? She started, but didn't finish. My father muttered something under his breath, an empty cradle. I blinked. My mouth went dry. Marla didn't speak. She just looked down at Eliza, bouncing the baby on her lap and smiling smugly. Well, she finally said, not even glancing at me, at least we know who the real mother in the family is. I turned to Nolan, waiting for him to say something. To defend me. To remind them who we were and what we'd been through. But he just stared at his plate. I stood up. The tears were hot and immediate. I barely remember how I got to my car. I didn't look back. After that, I couldn't bring myself to step foot in that house again. But Nolan still went frequently. Eliza misses her uncle, he'd say. Marla made her chicken pot pie again, you remember how good it is. Your parents asked about you. Each sentence a paper cut, small and bleeding. He always returned with some new anecdote about Eliza. She's walking now. She says Uncle Noel when I walk in. I smiled weakly each time, but inside, I was breaking. I began to feel like an outsider in my own marriage and echo in the life I once helped build. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling while Nolan slept peacefully beside me, wondering if he regretted marrying me. Wondering if he wished he'd picked someone else, someone like Marla. And then came the Tuesday I will never forget. I left work early. I was excited, hopeful even I'd picked up Nolan's favorite takeout, thinking maybe we could reconnect over dinner, try to find our rhythm again. But the house was dark. His car wasn't in the driveway. That wasn't unusual, but something felt different. I called once. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed a notification from social media. Marla had posted a photo. Normally, I ignored her feed. I'd muted her updates months ago. But something made me click. The picture opened. My hands began to tremble. There was Nolan. Sitting on my parents' couch. Marla next to him, pressed closely into his side. Eliza on his lap. All three smiling like the perfect little family. The caption read, "Grateful for my favorite people blessed." I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I grabbed my keys and drove on instinct, on adrenaline, heart pounding louder than the engine. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw all their cars, my father's old Buick, my mother's sedan, Marla's hatchback. Nolan's SUV. The front door was unlocked, as usual. I stepped in quietly, my feet barely making a sound on the worn wood floor. Voices drifted from the living room. "Nolan," my mother was saying, "you've been so patient. You deserve to have children of your own. We already think of you as part of this family," my father added. "Marla, she's young, she can give you that future." I stopped in the hallway, frozen. "Why stay with someone who can't give you a family?" my mother whispered. I stepped into the room. They all turned, startled. Nolan stood quickly, eyes wide. My parents' faces went pale. Marla just smirked. "What is going on here?" My voice was calm, cold. No one answered. I looked directly at Nolan. "Are you having an affair with my sister?" He didn't respond. Didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor. "Nolan," I said again, louder this time. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "But, yes. I love her. And I want children." "You want a child so badly," Marla said smugly, placing her hand on his arm, "and I already have one." I turned to my parents. "And you support this?" "He deserves a real family," my father said. "You can't blame him for wanting a future," my mother added. I couldn't speak. My throat burned. My heart felt like it had shattered in one silent burst. Without a word, I turned around, walked to the front door, and left. I packed a bag that night. Left a note. "File the paperwork. I'll have my lawyer contact yours." The next day, I moved into a small rental across town, quiet and modest but mine. I deleted all social media. Blocked all their numbers. The divorce moved quickly. We had no children, no shared property beyond the house, and neither of us wanted to prolong things. We divided our assets evenly. Nolan signed over the house to me, which I later sold to free myself of any lingering memories. It was a quiet ending to what had once been a hopeful beginning. I relocated to a smaller town outside Columbus, took a job at a local architecture firm, and focused on putting the pieces of myself back together. The nights were the hardest. Not just because of the loneliness, but because of the questions that echoed in the silence. Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't he fight for us? Why did they all so easily cast me aside? But there was something healing about starting over in a place where no one knew my story. I decorated my new apartment with soft colors, filled the bookshelves with design journals and mystery novels, bought an old record player and filled my evenings with music and long walks. I wasn't ready to date again, not for a long time. But life has a way of catching you off guard when you least expect it. It was a Saturday morning, and I was at the local farmer's market picking up tomatoes when I accidentally bumped into someone while reaching for a bunch of radishes. Our bags clattered to the ground, scattering apples and herbs across the pavement. "I am so sorry," he said, stooping to help me. He looked up, and I met the kindest blue eyes I'd ever seen. "I'm Everett." I smiled, a little shy. Lydia. He gestured to my fallen tomatoes. Let me make it up to you. Can I at least buy you a coffee? I hesitated. But something about him, his calmness, the slight nervousness in his voice, made me say yes. That coffee turned into a walk through the park, then lunch at a small cafe 2 blocks away. He told me he was a science teacher at the local middle school. Divorced, no kids, just a dog named Kip who liked chasing birds but was afraid of water. I found myself smiling more in 2 hours than I had in months. It didn't happen fast, Everett, and I took things slow. He respected that I wasn't ready to dive headfirst into something serious. But over time, he became the calm in the chaos. He never pressed for details about my past, only listened when I was ready to share. And when I finally told him about the infertility diagnosis, about Nolan, about Marla, he didn't flinch. You are not broken, he said. Whatever life brings, we'll face it together. If we want children someday, we'll figure that out. But I didn't fall for you because of any future we might have. I'm here because I love you now. It was the most genuine thing anyone had ever said to me. We got married in a quiet courthouse ceremony surrounded by a handful of close friends. No lavish receptions, no family speeches. Just 2 people who had known loss, standing together, ready to build something new. A year into our marriage, something strange began happening. I was constantly tired. I chalked it up to stress at work. Then came the nausea, first in the mornings, then at random times during the day. Everett joked that maybe Kip was sharing his dog treats with me. But when I nearly fainted while walking through the garden center one afternoon, he insisted I see a doctor. I went. Reluctantly. The doctor ran a routine blood test, then a follow-up. When she returned with the results, her expression was unreadable. Mrs. Whitlow, she said, sitting across from me, congratulations. You're pregnant. I laughed, more from disbelief than amusement. That's not possible, I said. I was diagnosed with ovarian insufficiency. I've been told I can't conceive. She offered a soft smile. I know it's rare, but it's not unheard of. Sometimes, the body defies the odds. We'll monitor you closely, but I assure you, your results are clear. I walked out of that clinic in a daze. Everett was waiting outside with Kip. When he saw my face, he stood up quickly. Everything okay? I nodded, then shook my head, then started to cry. We're going to have a baby, I whispered. He froze, blinked once, then wrapped me in a tight hug. Thank you for choosing to let life surprise you. We didn't tell anyone outside our small circle of friends. We agreed early on my former family had lost the right to be part of my story. They didn't know about Everett, about our marriage, and now, they wouldn't know about the baby. I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy on a cool March morning. We named him Calder, after the artist who taught the world that balance could be both fragile and beautiful. He had a full head of dark hair, Everett's eyes, and the quietest cry I'd ever heard. Holding him for the first time, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not vindication. Not victory. Just peace. Calder's first year flew by in a haze of midnight feedings, baby giggles, soft lullabies, and Everett falling asleep with a picture book open on his chest. Our house was small, but it overflowed with love. Every creak of the wood floor, every chip in the paint, felt like part of our story now. We didn't have much in terms of extended family, but our friends filled that gap. My co-worker Julie became Aunt Jules, and Everett's best friend Theo was Uncle T. Calder had a village. A chosen one. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in Calder's nursery, watching him sleep, wondering how life had brought me here. After everything, every betrayal, every heartbreak, I'd landed exactly where I was meant to be. I didn't think I'd ever cross paths with Marla or Nolan again. But fate, it seemed, had one more twist waiting. It had been almost 4 years since I'd last seen Marla, Nolan, or my parents. 4 years since the betrayal. 4 years since I walked out and never looked back. Then, one spring afternoon, Everett and I took Calder to visit an old college friend who lived near the town where I grew up. It was a rare warm day, so after lunch, we decided to walk to the nearby park. Calder, now 3 and endlessly curious, was determined to show his new toy dump truck the biggest hill in the world. We were halfway down Main Street when I saw them. First, it was the sound of my father's voice. I'd know that deep, measured tone anywhere. Then, my mother's laugh, still a little too loud, still full of forced charm. And then Marla's unmistakable posture, her head tilted slightly upward as if the world owed her something. They were outside a grocery store, loading bags into a car. Marla was standing beside Nolan, her arm linked in his. 2 little girls played nearby, laughing and climbing into the open trunk. I stopped. My heart thundered in my chest. Everett noticed and followed my gaze. Is that them? He asked gently. I nodded. That's them. Just then, Calder ran ahead. Mommy, look. Big truck like mine. His voice rang out clear, young, and full of joy. That's when they looked over. All of them, Marla, Nolan, my parents. Their faces changed almost in unison. First confusion, then disbelief. Finally, the realization hit. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's grocery bag slipped slightly in his grasp. They had seen him. Calder. My son. They stepped forward instinctively, and I instinctively stepped in front of him. I could feel Everett at my side. Calm. Solid. Who is this? My mother finally asked, though her eyes were glued to Calder. I looked at her squarely. This is my son. Calder. There was a pause that stretched long enough to feel heavy. But, how? The doctors, my father stammered. They were wrong, I said simply. It happens. It happened. Marla let out a small scoff. You expect us to believe you gave birth to him? After everything? Really? Everett took a small step forward. You don't have to believe it. He's not your concern. My mother's voice cracked. Sarah, he's our grandson. No, I replied, firm and clear. You gave up that right when you chose to support Marla over me. When you called me broken. When you stood by and let my marriage fall apart. We made a mistake, she whispered. Many, I said. Calder tugged on my hand, looking up at me. Mommy, are these your friends? No, sweetheart, I said softly. Just people from a long time ago. My father stepped forward slightly. He looks like you, he said quietly, almost in awe. He's nothing like you, I responded. He's kind. He's curious. And he's surrounded by people who love him. Marla, not to be outdone, folded her arms. Well, I still have my family. My daughters. My husband. She looked at Nolan, expecting agreement. But Nolan didn't speak. He was staring at Calder. Something unreadable in his expression. He looks a little like me too, he murmured. I turned to him slowly. Funny you mention that, Nolan. Have you been tested since we separated? He frowned. Tested for what? Fertility, I said plainly. Marla looked uncomfortable. What does that have to do with anything? I pulled out my phone, the same one that held photos of Calder's first steps, his first day at daycare, his first drawing of our family. I also had something else. I opened a folder labeled receipts. I tapped on a photo and turned the screen toward them. It was blurry, but clear enough of Marla, dressed in a pale green sweater, seated in a restaurant booth, her hand entwined with someone else's. A man who was definitely not Nolan. They were kissing. What's this? Nolan asked, his voice going low and sharp. Marla's face drained of color. That's old. It was nothing. It was during your anniversary weekend, I said, flipping to another photo. While you were supposed to be away with Nolan. Remember? The hotel reservation you canceled last minute? My mother reached for the phone. I pulled it back. Nolan was staring at Marla. Tell me the truth. It didn't mean anything, she cried. You were so distant. You always were. And Eliza? Rose, he asked, his voice trembling now. Are they even mine? She didn't answer. Nolan took a step back. My parents were stunned into silence. You helped her steal my husband, I said softly. And now? The truth comes out. You broke something to get what you wanted. And now it's falling apart. Calder looked between all the adults and tugged on Everett's hand. Can we go to the park now? Yes, buddy, Everett said, scooping him up gently. Let's go find that big hill. I looked back one last time. They were standing there, my parents, pale and quiet, Nolan visibly shaken, Marla red-faced and shaking with anger. Goodbye, I said. For good this time. That was the last time I saw any of them. I later heard through a mutual friend that Nolan had demanded paternity tests for both girls. Neither child was biologically his. He left immediately. Marla moved back in with our parents, her perfect life unraveled. They tried to reach out. Emails. Letters. Even a birthday card addressed to Calder. But I didn't respond. Everett and I made the decision together. The people who walked away from me had no place in the life I had built. Calder didn't need their confusion, their regret, or their conditions. He had love. He had us. Epilogue. Calder is 4 now. He loves construction trucks and peanut butter sandwiches. He still falls asleep with a book in his lap, just like Everett. Sometimes, I sit on our front steps while Kip patrols the yard and Everett plays soccer with Calder, and I marvel at the way life returned to me. Not in the way I expected. Not in the timing I'd hoped for. But better. People often think miracles come in loud, dramatic waves. But sometimes, they come quietly in whispered truths, in second chances, in children we were told we could never have. I was told I wouldn't be a mother. I was told I wasn't enough. I was told I was broken. But I am a mother. I am whole. And I am more than enough. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.